Well, with the provincial and national elections coming closer, many political parties are trying to get support from different groups in society. One of the groups that has a certain power are farmers. Of course, you know the role that they play in our society. Sometimes they find themselves right in the middle of some of our big debates or disputes, or is that friendly arguments? Wandile Sihlobo is the chief economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Wandile, good afternoon to you. Firstly, farmers themselves, what do they want to hear from politicians during an election? And Wandile, like all of us, they probably just want the lights to stay on.
Absolutely, Stephen. That's the first part which they want. They want those lights on. But they also worried about the ports for exports. Because as you know, Stephen, our sector exports about half of what we produce. So they do want to see efficiencies there. And I would say the other aspects that they are really deeply concerned about is rising crime in rural South Africa. Municipalities that are not delivering to their optimal level is another thing. The deterioration of roads and the railway line is also another aspect that they would want to hear a bit more about. They also want to see a release of the land because, Stephen, you know this fact that the South African government has accumulated over 2 million hectares of land, particularly in a period from 2006 up until to today. And I think a release of that with title deeds or some form of long-term tradable leases, those are all of the aspects that I think the agricultural community would like to hear a bit more plans on.
I'm going to come to back to land in just a moment because it's so important. But firstly, infrastructure. It's one thing if you're exporting coal and your coal is delayed, but if your lemons are delayed, you have a real problem, don't you? Time matters to farmers.
It matters a lot because you are dealing with the perishables here, but also you are in an environment that is growingly competitive and also to an extent protectionism. So getting your products there before you are kicked out of those markets or at those markets when your product arrives, you don't get told that it doesn't meet a certain standards. It has to get there really while it's still fresh. So this is why the issue of the ports is so important. But I think the bigger goal of the ports is also for the country. I mean, we generate a lot of revenue out of exporting the farming stuff. Think of 2022, where we generated a record $12.8 billion as South Africa. And in fact, even in 2023, for the first 9 months of the year, we had already generated around about $10.1 billion, up 1% from a previous year. So these are some of the numbers that are really, I would say economically, they are significant, but also then those ports being efficient and agile to getting these products to their key destinations on time is crucial.
And then roads as well. I mean, if your lemons arrive in Beijing, but they're all battered and bruised because the roads were so bad, that really doesn't help you.
That doesn't help even. The issue of roads, it cuts both ways in a sense that for large farmers, of course, then complicating the delivery of the product. But you also have small scale and the medium scale farmers that are servicing some of the local markets in South Africa. That the roads that are not functioning, they increase the transaction cost for them and even complicates for some of the farmers where you find that a farmer that is having grain at some village in the Eastern Cape suddenly cannot take that into Mthatha or other areas. And of course, then that means that any revenue they would have generated from there is wiped out. So you have those aspects for the commercial farmers, but also for the medium and small scale farmers. And I think the roads is one aspect of that. So the municipalities, they really have to do something by improving the road network.
All right, Wandile, to the land, because it's such an important issue. You suggest that actually farmers would like to see government releasing the land that it controls or owns. What's happened to that 2 million hectares?
Stephen, I have to state this as we are live on national television. I mean, we've had conversation with the leadership at the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, and my sense is that they are willing and looking forward to actually addressing this point. I wish then that they quickly release some of the land. Where is it or what? And it's currently sitting in the books of the government. Some of the parcels, of course, they have some people on it. But I think that releasing it with title deeds so that you unlock the capital. But in some where there are no people allocated, selecting the beneficiaries in a better criteria so that you really select people that can optimize that land, that will be key. Because let's face it, Stephen, this land, if it is put into full production, it can lead to that idea of growing the South African agricultural pie. In our numbers, together with the Bureau for Food and Agricultural Policy, we think that South Africa's agricultural gross value added could expand by anything between 15 to 30%, provided all of the land that is underutilized is put into full production. And along with that, there's employment that can be created, expansion in the volumes that we can put in export markets, which again is why the roads and the railway and the ports are so important. Because when those volumes improve, we need to be able to take them to key markets effectively.
So we have 2 million hectares of land. Let's just say 2/3 of that is not occupied by anyone at the moment. This is land doing nothing, and you could get it to do something relatively easily if it was just managed properly.
I think, Stephen, some of it is not really, as you rightly say, not doing much. There may be people that are there, but I think if they are given the stronger rights, they invest onto that, they tap into blended finance. These are all of the aspects that could help us go forward. And I think the agricultural community is waiting to hear what the political leaders from various parties are saying and what will be their plans on really confronting those aspects. And I think if they articulate a compelling message, perhaps the rural vote might just go to them.
One of the interesting things about the last 6 years and about land generally is that in around 2019, you'll remember from 2017 until sort of 2019, the last time we had an election, of course, a national provincial election was 2019, the issue of land expropriation without compensation had huge heat and huge power. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm fairly certain that the land issue is going to come back into our politics in many different ways over the years because it's sort of the foundation of the racialized inequality we see now. And yet it doesn't seem to have that heat going into this election. Are farmers feeling a bit, I don't know how they feel about it, relieved perhaps?
I think it is a bit of a relief that we are not talking about expropriation, but we are rather talking about what should we be doing going forward. And Stephen, we have to give credit to the colleagues, the presidents, and at the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, because the colleagues there have done a lot of work at the presidency. From back 2012, the Chapter 6 of the NDP spoke to what needs to happen in the sector, land and agricultural development and rural economy. The Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan under Minister Titiza spoke also about what really needs to be implemented along bringing private sector to the table, labor to the table. It's about then to say how can then everyone that is looking into this draw in some ideas of saying how you implement those effectively. And I think these are the plans that have been discussed over time, to an extent even taken the heat away from aspects of expropriation. And I must say, I think the South Africans also saw the dangers of going down that path. And I don't think that there is much of a discussion around that. Still, pursuing land reform in an effective way is something that I think remains priority.
It seems almost that, and I don't know if there will be a major change in this election or not, but no one's really expecting a major change to agricultural policy, no matter what happens.
I don't think there is a major expectation on a change. And Stephen, this is a sector, and I don't want to delve in as if I'm bringing only terrible news to you this afternoon, because the sector has done some of the things fairly well, Stephen. You look back to 1994 up until to today and say what has happened in South Africa's agriculture. The sector has more than doubled in value and in volume terms. In improving food security, we are the most food secure country at a national level in sub-Saharan Africa. Employment jobs are the highest level, higher now compared to where we were in 1994. So there's a number of things that have gone right. But then it's still the question of saying we are not at capacity and there are risks to the sector that can actually put the gains that we have been able to achieve so far at risk, which is these aspects that I think needs to be resolved. But I don't think that there's time and space to be introducing fairly new radical ideas in agriculture. You draw from Chapter 6 of NDP as well as the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan, and I think both of those documents speak head-on to some of the issues that are keeping farmers up at night.
Wandile, the elections all over the world at the moment. A large proportion of the country, of the world's population, are voting in democratic elections, and food prices is going to be an issue all around the world, particularly because of what's happened in the last few years. Our food price inflation seems to be a little lower than it was. Do you expect it to come down even further?
We expect food inflation, Stephen, to moderate going into 2024 because we're having a really good agricultural conditions in the country. I know the people in the West are struggling with heat. We are nearly done with the harvesting of our winter crops there. And in other regions of South Africa, agricultural conditions are favorable. So we're expecting this good crop in here. But also when you look globally, global agricultural conditions are promising. South America, things are looking well. Europe, things are looking well, as well as the EU. So our thinking is that if there aren't major risks that come out of energy prices, then we may see food prices moderating nicely in 2024. This again, Stephen, gives us space to focus on those long-term policy aspects if the near-term issues are not as pressing as perhaps what we had seen in the past few years.
Wandile Sihlobo, thank you very much indeed. Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Really appreciate the time.